An OG lever-action pistol-caliber carbine with some modern flair that'll let you mount all of your Wish.com bullshit accessories coming up. What is up, guys? My name is John with PewPewTactical.com, your definitive source for gun reviews, gear guides, and all things that go bang, and we back. You may have noticed that we have done a pretty hefty amount of AR reviews recently, and while it's always useful to have sort of a running back catalog of reviews for people to sift through, wow, does it get tiring reviewing black rifle after black rifle. Thankfully, the cloudy, Armalite-laden skies appear to be lifting for the time being, and through them shines a lever-action ray of light. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this poetic prose, but long story short, Henry's 357 Big Boy X is a pretty welcome breath of fresh air as far as plinkers go. Essentially an update to Henry's flagship Big Boy series of lever actions, the Big Boy X takes the rustic charm of wood and polished steel and replaces them with sleek, black polymer furniture and surfaces that are going to be much more familiar to the modern eye. The Big Boy X we've got on hand is capable of feeding both 38 Special and 357, and finally features a side-loading gate that allows for quick reloads without removal of the magazine tube, although quick is going to be a pretty relative term here. Now, I have no real experience with lever guns outside of the one or two that I've been allowed to play around with for the website, but in terms of the mechanical differences in getting something like this to run as smooth as any kind of modern rifle design, it took me a good amount of warming up to get used to. Although, if the cowboy action shooting type folks have anything to say about it, you absolutely can get a lever gun running with some pretty brutal speed if you dedicate your life to cowboy LARPing. I found that the side-loading gate was pretty particular about the exact angle one needs to hit the door at in order to effectively load a round. And although it's reasonably okay with only a few cartridges in the 7-round magazine tube, it's definitely going to make you fight for those last few, though I suspect that might break in over time. It's also a bit of a pain in the ass to load with gloves on, and that trap door has a habit of wanting to grab your gloved fingers. Outside of that, the action itself is pretty damn smooth, although I definitely do need to get into the habit of really driving that lever forward to ensure a clean ejection of a spent casing. There are actually a few different instances where a casing failed to extract, and at one point a live round actually fell out of the chamber while I was attempting to manipulate the lever, but I suspect that that has way more to do with me being a little bit unexperienced with the platform than it has to do anything with the Big Boy itself. The trigger is incredibly crisp, as obviously the lever is going to cock the hammer, meaning that you're right up against the trigger's wall as soon as you place pressure on it. No real creep or take-up to speak of. Now, I've fired a handful of 4570 lever guns before, and obviously the 357 is not really even in the same ballpark recoil-wise, and even the jump up to 357 Magnum from 38 Special was barely noticeable in terms of felt recoil impulse. Not that 357 is a really wild cartridge when you've got a decently heavy carbine built around it, but it is important to note nonetheless. The gun comes with fiber optic iron sights featuring a green front and dual orange dot rear, and we've added an aftermarket section of Picatinny rail for attaching optics on the receiver as well, though it should be noted that the addition of the optics rail is going to block your iron sights completely. We had opted originally to run a super small and minimalist low-profile optic, and as such at first chose a Vortex Venom, but we had some issues with actually getting it dialed in and just couldn't get that point of impact quite right. So for the sake of expediency, we wound up mounting my personal EOTech EXPS on the rifle, and despite the fact that you're not really going to get a super solid cheek weld, it worked out okay. For demonstration purposes, we did want to show that Sig Sauer's Romeo 5 actually works really well on this rail and this height-over bore if you swap out that high mount that they come stock with and go back to the low-profile mount that should be included with the optic. Cheek weld or no, it actually didn't appear to make a huge difference once I started warming up to the gun, and although it's not super impressive, I was able to bring about 100 yards steel pretty consistently while standing once the optic was on target. While we didn't do any super scientific testing of groups, we were able to produce a pretty decent cluster of steel impacts at 25 yards with no issues. And realistically, it's a 357 carbine. You're not going to be pulling any Mark Wahlberg sniper shots off with this thing. The handguard itself features a 3 and 9 o'clock M-LOK mount, which is perfect for the addition of stuff like scout profile lights, especially if you've got a mount that puts them up at a high 1 o'clock, if you feel the need to add some throwable lumens onto the business end of your cyberpunk cowboy gun. There's a small bit of Picatinny rail at the very end of the handguard as well, which while intended for a bipod, is actually not a bad spot for something like a low-profile hand stop if you'd prefer a little bit of extra grip to index off of instead. We added a sort of generic spandex shell carrier thing to the stock after cutting a slit in the carrier itself to make room for the sling swivel, although it's obvious, now that we have it on here, that it's intended for 308 casings, and 38 and 357 are just gonna kind of get lost in there, but +5 cool guy points. Lastly, the barrel itself features 5/8 by 24 threads, which typically match up to 308 muzzle devices. However, you best not be putting a 308 break on a 357 gun, lest ye be wanting to lose some fingers. Anecdotally, we've actually heard some folks have had success using 350 Legend muzzle devices, although your mileage may vary and we're not at all liable if you wind up grenading yourself. All in all, the Henry 357 Big Boy X is a super fun plinker that walks that middle line between sarsaparilla-soaked vintage flair with some sleek modern features that make it a blast as a range toy or a small game gun. If you're looking to get your Instagram swag points on with a fully tricked out and modernized lever gun in a pretty functional cartridge that isn't going to tenderize your dainty basement-dwelling flesh after a day out on the range, the Henry 357 Big Boy X is a pretty good base for it, even if that name makes it sound more like a SoundCloud rapper than a firearm. Alright guys, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel as we've got lots more on the way, and like I said, we are back to full content production. Once again, my name is John with PewPew Tactical, and we will see you next time.